Because sharpness is so essential, I was gonna do this morning, but you guys can see it, and I'll try to convey like the whole system that I've learned, which is literally it is verbatim what Murray Carter does. So I always just send people to the University of YouTube and check out Murray Carter's video. It's Blade Sharpening Fundamentals. It's a DVD, and I used to sell it. And I was like, I was a believer, proselytize people onto his method. And I think when it comes down to it, it's just a very basic Japanese approach. And it is really simple. That's the cool thing about it. It helps you understand sharpness. If it has a drawback, it's just the toil. It's a little bit of work. It takes a little bit of time. And it just amounts to acute is sharp, obtuse is dull. And so I'm not going to use I don't know what angle is on my knives. I don't have any jigs that are or guides that are going to keep me on a proper angle. Basically, I just make it as acute as possible, as metallurgically possible. So you take it all the way acute. And then there's lots of room there because an acute knife cuts, it's sharp. And the difference between super acute and just slightly less acute is nothing. So you can have that variability when you're, because I'm going to be rocking it because I'm just doing it by hand. It's not going to be a perfect, consistent grind. So we're going to be waffling between super, super acute and super acute. But that's okay. That's all cutting. That's all really sharp, and that's all good to go. It's when you're trying to do like a 22 angle, exactly. And then if you take it up to a 22.5, it's dull. You're not cutting. So that's why I like this. Just go acute. And you know that you've taken the metal to its limit. If you go all the way acute, really thin, when you can see the edge like a string, it'll be like foil on the knife, and you can peel it off. And that's kind of when you've taken it to its limit. You've made it so acute that there's not sufficient structure in the steel to hold the edge, so it's just this floppy little piece of foil. And you can peel that off, and then you go back to your stone to the angle that you ground in that piece of foil and just raise it up a little tiny bit and grind in that as the cutting edge. So it's just really simple, which I like.
So what you just said in a microscope would go like this, because it was too acute to
yeah,
at the very cutting edge.
Yes.
Thing.
Yeah, so Murray breaks it down into, he calls it the primary edge and the secondary edge. I don't know why he calls it an edge, but the primary edge is actually the leading part that is cutting through things. The secondary edge is just this larger bevel on the side that you use to thin the blade, because thinning the blade brings you so much more closer to sharp. If sharp is acute, you're going to need a thin blade to get there. If you purchase a blade that's really thick in dimension, you're going to spend hours thinning that thing down so you can get that acute profile. So these, I'll just show you. I'll try to pick one that actually really does need a new edge. So the thing that most people do is they just focus on sharpening the primary edge, so the cutting edge. And as you do that, that's going to work like 2 times, and then it's not going to work anymore, because you're sharpening that leading edge. You're just sharpening that, and you're sharpening it back into the thicker dimension of the steel. And so now you're down where steel's this thick, much thicker, and you're going at the same angle, what feels like the same angle, but you're only getting that. You're getting a really obtuse, non-cutting edge. So, all that to say, with this particular method, which is just Japanese water stones with a coarse and a fine, you're going to spend a lot of time on the coarse merely thinning your knife. Like 10 times the amount of time you spend on the primary cutting edge, you should be spending on thinning the dimension. That's where all your time is spent, because you're taking away so much more steel. I'm scraping this entire bevel here, and it just takes so much longer to thin that. Whereas I can put in a primary cutting edge and just like really fast in minutes, you know, because I'm not grinding away so much steel. If that makes sense.
Is it important to spend like $100 on a stone, or is it $30?
Yeah, I mean, technically, you could get pretty sharp on a cinder block and cardboard. The cinder block is a coarse grit, and cardboard has clay in it, so it has a grit. If you follow this method, you can get pretty sharp on those.
Do you want to just move in?
Sure. That's
this. Okay. But technically,
yeah. So because it's all about the method, less about the medium. As long as you can find a coarse and a fine, you can do this. But yeah, these are like $50 or $60.
Can you get a better edge?
Yeah, it's more of a time saving thing.
Okay.
Because your time is not useless. So it's good to get these two. These are more efficient, and I do find them to generally be more efficient than oil stones.
Yeah.
For some reason, these it doesn't take quite as long. So what grinding in an edge looks like, and honestly, so bracket off that thing I just said about spending time thinning the knife. I should spend like 20 minutes thinning this knife before grinding in a primary edge. But I'm not going to do that because we don't have 20 minutes. I'm just going to grind in a primary edge so you can see it. But basically, I divide the knife into segments, like 3-finger sections. It's really simple. And I'm going to find, that's where I thin the knife.
That's the bevel.
That's that secondary edge or the bevel. And to thin this, I would do this like, 20 times. Then you move your finger up a little bit. 20 times or so. Just counting. Move it up a little bit. And this is thinning. And you got to do this for a while. Bring the dimension of the knife down. All the way to the tip. And that's what I would do to thin this knife. Now you can see I scuffed it all up. It was more or less polished.
Do you watch the steel coming off in the water of the stone?
Yeah.
To make sure you get a consistent flash of steel.
Yeah.
Coming off.
Well, I just like to keep the pores of the stone clear, because because I sharpen a lot, or I use my knives a lot, and so it's very much if I let myself, I could disappear behind the stones for days. And so I have, just out of necessity, I clear the stone a lot because I want that thing to be biting as aggressively as possible, so we can get this done, get the knife sharp. All right, so I would do that for like 20 minutes, but we just did it for 30 seconds. And then just to put in the cutting edge, I'm just gonna lift it up a little bit. Just a little bit from that.
Just a little bit.
A little tiny bit. It's a hair. And if this were a double bevel knife, this happens to be a chisel knife, if it were double, I would do the same thing on this side. You just switch hands and grind it all the way in. But this only has one bevel, so that's all I have to worry about here.
In your experience, you like that one side, one bevel, that chisel, so you're
honestly, yeah,
regular.
Yeah, it's just efficiency, less lifetime spent behind the stones.
So on a not beveled knife, like a Western knife,
Yeah,
you want to look for a polished surface that's much greater,
yeah,
right? And you're looking at the knife itself to make sure your angle is good, because it's a lot harder to find than this.
yeah. I almost have. Really, so this doesn't have any obvious bevel or secondary edge on it. So when I thin this, I take it to my little water wheel, and
What's your water wheel?
it's a little Tormek. It's just a little 8-inch. It was cheap. You plug it in the wall and you push a button, and it spins in a trough of water, so it keeps things cool. It saves a little bit of time. And I just, wherever you press on the top surface of the blade, that's how I direct the force of the grinding on the other side. So I just hold it on the wheel. And if I want to create, a pretty distinct secondary bevel, then that's where I put my fingers. You know what I mean? and you just hold it, and it looks ugly. I mean, it looks ugly for a while. You know, it'll be wobbly and squirrely, but I don't really care about the looks. But if you keep at it and you keep grinding it in, you keep thinning it, eventually it'll become homogeneous.
Yep.
So I just direct it wherever your fingers are. That's where, you know, even as far as the depth of the blade. If you're up here, it's going to be grinding the spine. So you just be close to the edge, and that's how I do it with the water wheel.
So on your more curved Western knives, you do not like to use the Japanese push method. You like to use the true wheel.
No, I use this exact same method.
You're just talking about the secondary edge.
I'm just
get the
just to thin it, because these are weird because they're chiseled, right? So it's one flat edge. This is not. This is a standard Western. It's like it's got, you know, 2 bevels. So
With the wheel you use for the Western, not the chisel.
no, I'll use it for both.
For thinning.
Yeah.
in general.
When I sharpen this back into the thick part of the blade, I'll take it to the wheel.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
On those knives there, you're not exactly perpendicular, like an angle on the stone.
Yeah.
The Western knife, you are perpendicular?
No, I'll hold it at an angle too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just more ergonomic. It's more comfortable. I can keep it more consistent than trying to do this.
Is there any benefit to having a stone that's longer than the knife you're sharpening, or does it matter at all?
I don't think it matters. They're all about this size. This is like the universal stone size.
There's a cheap thing you can make. I made one. It's a piece of plywood
Mm-hmm.
with a board screwed to the bottom of one side and to the top of the other, and you put the stone against it, and you just slide it on a bench, and you get on it,
Yeah,
and the stone is here, so the whole thing is fixed, and then you just
yeah,
go, and then there's your water.
yeah. That's
So
great.
it's not wobbly or whatever.
Yeah, this is when I have this. This is what I have set up in my shop that I don't have yet. But there's just a wall here, so I just belly the board onto the wall,
Yeah.
and that holds everything for me.
Yeah.
So, and then for a primary edge, it's we're just gonna go up a little bit, and I'm gonna grind it in, and I might do 8 or so strokes. Or 10, whatever that was. And I'm just marching down the length of the blade. I try to use a lot of the surface area of the stone, you know. I'll move around on the stone just so it wears a little more evenly, but I'll still flatten the stone because it'll nonetheless get quite a trough in it.
So one stroke is forward and back, or is it
Yeah,
one,
what is
two?
it? Let's see. 1, 2. Yeah, 1 stroke is forward and back. That's how I count it.
So, do you like to use like a stropping method as well that Murry talks about?
Yeah.
From the tip? Okay.
Yeah, that's coming next. So this step is the grinding. Like we are taking away steel. We are going to create an edge profile. That's what this step is. That's why it's back and forth. It's much more aggressive.
Do you
Can't tell.
do you find that the angle of the knife on the stone, like this way versus that, do you find that affects the actual cutting edge just based off of how like the actual like micro serrations are lining up on the edge, or is that
It
not-
probably does. It probably does. And I've always done it at quite an angle to the stone. I've
Okay.
never done it square. It's really uncomfortable for one. And I haven't been able to compare them. You know, I don't know. But this is the way that Murry does it, with quite an angle, you know, like about that.
And as you're going through your grinding process, how do you find that method translates into the curve of a Western knife? Because in my
Yeah.
experience, a straight edge plays very well with that method.
Oh, yeah.
But a curve, I have to do some finagling.
Yeah, so, you know, this has got a pretty substantial curve on it, and if I were to grind this edge in, you have to bring it up like this. So I think about, you know, I'm grinding an edge down here. I'm just thinking about where that edge is contacting the stone. And I actually end up, and so what it looks like is raising your elbow. And it looks like you're making it a more obtuse angle. But that's not necessarily the case. You might be keeping relatively close to the same angle from here, you know, down to there. That's all about the same angle. It's just awkward. So you just have to raise up for that bull nose. And yeah, they're notoriously difficult to sharpen. You know, those are always the hardest parts.
It seems like a lot less variables though than trying to get the whole blade to contact the stone with each pass.
Yeah.
Moving
that's
your
how
arm
I've
in this
learned.
like dance.
Yes.
Kind of statically fixing a millimeter section of edge.
Yeah, and I do, you know, my little 3-finger sections along the blade overlap a lot.
Yeah.
You know, as I go. They really overlap.
So Murray never lifts his knife from, like, he doesn't do one stroke. He just always, no matter what knife, what shape,
Yeah.
always a back and forth.
Yeah, at least for this stage, which is grinding in, shaping an edge profile.
So there are different stages. That
Yes, I'm going to get into the next stage
Yeah.
once we get the edge in. So I just want to feel with a 3-finger test of edge sharpness that I've ground in a new edge, which basically would feel very aggressive because this is a really coarse stone. This is 800. My hands are too cold. I can't really feel it, but it's biting. You want it to feel very aggressive. I think there's an edge there. Pretty sure there is. Yeah, if my shop is cold, I'll even like do some pull-ups or something, or you know, have hot water by just to get some warmth to your extremities, because yeah,
Get him some
you
hot water.
just
Could you get him some hot water?
it's much harder to feel. I think that's an edge. All right, so once it feels aggressive, anyone else want to feel this? 4 fingers. See if it feels aggressive.
So, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here.
You want to make up Orion?
Obviously, like a finer angle, you know, more cutting power there,
Yeah.
lesser ability. What are your thoughts on a finer angle, but with a lower grit for more serration into
So by finer, do you mean like acute?
acute? Yeah.
Okay, so a more acute angle with a higher grit.
Lower grit for more serration.
With a lower grit, more teeth. That's kind of I mean, those teeth will just be weak. They'll be even weaker.
Okay.
You know, because they're really thin because they're acute, and so I think you'll get like 4 great strokes out of it, and it'll be done.
The more this it goes, the less time you have, hey?
Yeah.
Like you could, if you wanted more time, like you're hunting all day without sharpening, you want to go this way a little bit,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, I just go all the way acute, and I rely on the quality of the steel to retain that edge all day, and me not dulling it like a moron. So I won't cut things with grit, with dirt in them ever, you know.
Do you want this back?
Yeah, eventually.
Do you use micro bevels, or do you think they're just not worth the effort?
I probably don't use them because I don't know what that is. Yeah. Just these. This is it. It's my whole sharpening setup, except for the little Tormek.
Simple is good.
Yeah, that's what I like about it.
With your water stone, do you ever have to flatten that?
Yeah, they get pitted, and honestly, one of the easiest ways to do that is just take it to the sidewalk with a hose.
A diamond stone is like it's like
Can you
50
explain
bucks.
flattening? Can you explain that for a second?
Yeah,
A diamond stone?
Just as you use it,
And that you use that to
usually
flatten your other
it'll
stones?
develop a trough. And you'll have
That's
high,
cool.
high corners
Yeah.
and a trough in the middle.
around the corner.
And honestly, you can still achieve, if you follow this method faithfully, you can still work with that. But it is nice. It's more efficient. It's an efficiency advantage to keep your stones flat. And so I didn't bring it, but I do have a flattening stone. It's kind of a piece of crap. I got a cheap one. It's not good. You have a diamond one. I think that's much
It's
better.
called diamond. They're cheap. It's like $60 maybe.
Okay, yeah.
And it's like 200 grit, you might say. So
Yeah,
you
real
can
coarse.
use it to, if you get a ding in your knife,
Yeah.
you can use it as well.
Yeah,
But the guys that I learned from flatten that
yeah,
all the time.
yeah.
And you're always like looking at the water and the steel in the water, and as soon as all of it comes off that, it's flat.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's like a flat plane.
Yeah, I can always tell a different, just in color hue too, you know. And it's always this last little bit is the last
Yeah, right.
to go light, right in the middle, you know, because the fresher stone that you're exposing is lighter in color.
So,
Does that feel really aggressive to everyone?
So pretty
Feel that?
aggressive.
Like it's got teeth.
For context, is that so? That is like the actual like primary edge that you've touched up, and you were done touching up that
Secondary edge.
Yes. That was, yeah, so this was primary. This is the cutting edge because we can feel it all the way out here. And yeah, it's got little shavings too.
So for those of us that are using double bevel knives, if we find that it has a little bit more, one of the things I'll run into if I like tap it on my fingernail is that it has a little bit more, it digs in more on like more like one direction than the other. If versus not in an ideal world, it's like totally even. What are ways to correct that and get this thing totally like even and aligned?
So I counted, just I did, like 8 strokes per segment here.
Okay.
And I do that all the way up the blade, and maybe 4 segments. So you just make sure you do it exactly that on this side, and that's as close as you can get, because it's not going to be perfect, because this is all by hand, but it's as close as you can get. So just make sure you do 8 strokes, 4 segments on the other side, also. So, and that's the best you can do. And then any other, again, if you're going for super acute, you have lots of room for error. For variability with your angle and with the evenness of both bevels. Like if it's really acute and one of them's doing that, like it's okay. You're going to be cutting really well. So
Wouldn't you say that, right? You're doing this process of taking the whole knife to the flat side of the knife.
Yeah.
So your primary and secondary edges right now are one thing. They are the same.
Yes.
And then you're going to put
ideal.
the primary edge onto
Yes, that's the ideal. We don't have time to go there with this, but that's how I do it. Yeah. That's the ideal. So once you have the edge ground in, then you strop it. And so this is just going away from the edge. And now we're just trying to get, I can even see a burr already, trying to get the flimsy little metal shavings off of here, off of my edge, with this stropping motion here.
Change grip for that?
I will eventually. I'll do it on the course. I'll strop it a little bit there, and it's really light. I'm not grinding away steel. That's not the point of this particular move. It's to polish a little bit the edge that I just ground in, which is to say it's got little metal hairs, steel hairs sticking up off of it, and I'm just trying to get rid of those.
So when you are butchering,
Yeah.
do you find, so when I'm using like a single bevel knife in the kitchen, I find that the knife tends to like want to curve a little bit just due to the nature of the chisel edge.
Yeah.
Do you find that happens in butchering, or is meat like a soft enough tissue as opposed to carrot that doesn't have like the structure to like force the knife to guide away?
It does happen in meat a little bit, yeah.
Okay.
Particularly, pigs with more dense fat. Less so with beef and lamb, but yeah, it doesn't. I've never found it to be any kind of hindrance. Okay. You just correct for it. Okay. You just account for it because you feel it happening. Yeah. So once you've stropped it, and I'd probably do it a little longer.
You still haven't touched the flat side of the knife.
Correct. Yeah. So I'm only gonna touch that with the super fine. But I'm just dropping this to get the edge nice and clean, because it's a little hairy. It's a little dirty right now.
Can you feel those burrs or see them as well?
Yeah, I can see them. Yeah, it's very hairy, and you can feel them. Yeah, that is very super aggressive now.
I've heard some mixed thoughts on using a touch of soap with water. Do you have a preference
So, man,
for
yeah.
that or no?
I've never done it. Yeah, I feel like once you get soap in this water or in these stones, it's in there forever. Because they're designed for water. And the soap changes the surface tension of the water. And I just think you'll have bubbles in your stones for like 10 years.
I accidentally used a dirty washcloth that had oil in it, and that got in my stone.
Oh.
I had to clean the crap out of that thing after. It was just not good.
Yeah.
Encouraged is one thing. Enforced.
Yeah. These pores will get in there.
Where's the line, I guess? That's the truth.
got that purple at the end of it. So you bring your knife, chisel side. It drives me crazy if I can't get them exactly the same both sides. My ADD or what is it?
OCD.
OCD.
Oh,
Whatever.
those acronyms.
Yeah, if it's not the same on both sides, I'll keep doing it and doing it and doing it.
And you won't have a knife.
Drives me nuts.
Sounds like the single bevel.
Yeah, the way to go.
Yeah.
Right.
One side.
Yeah. And you
It's
don't
so
have to worry about
painful to
them.
do this without
Right, yeah, exactly.
thinning the knife first, because it's just you're just creating more work for yourself. But later on,
It's like a really American thing to do.
yeah,
Just get the easy
in a
way
hurry,
for now.
you're shortchanging
yeah.
Pay for it later.
the process and paying for it later.
There we go. This one's got an edge now. And just own it.
The woodworker guy that taught me this with chisels says he spends an hour of an 8-hour day sharpening.
Yeah.
First part of the day?
Depends.
Right.
Depends how the work's going. You might spend 20 minutes at lunch or whatever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All that black on the
All right. This one's not that bad, actually. All right. So once you've got the is the other knife out here somewhere? The primary. Oh, it's going around. That's fine. You're good. Once you've got that now and it's super aggressive, you've established the the dimension, the profile of the edge, and so now you just need to smooth it out because it's got lots of teeth and lots of like fingers going everywhere from the coarse stone, and to give it strength, you need to polish it. And so this is a lot of knocking off the burr. This is when people talk about the burr. And this is just really smooth, and it's only stropping. These really fine stones are fun for polishing. You know, you can polish things up and make them look really pretty and reflective.
What's the grit on that?
I think it's 8,000. Yeah. I just want to polish what we just did, and because this is just one bevel, this is the only stone I put the flat side on. And for these, I guess this is a unique thing. I can actually go back and forth and kind of do a grinding motion on this, because the flat profile of the knife totally solidifies my angle, which is flat, if that makes sense. So I can just grind it in.
You would do that on a Western? You
Really
just drop.
precisely. Yeah, I would just drop on a Western. But it helps, that action does help knock down the burr a little bit.
So the idea of stropping, it is one direction, but there's sharpening and push. So you have like the western stroke, and the knife edge is going like into the grain, versus the strop is like the reverse direction. So here's your knife edge, and it's coming down like away.
Yeah, it's much less aggressive. The goal is not to take away, not to remove a whole bunch of steel. I just want to polish the edge that is there.
So there's a little J motion just for that tiny curvature at the end of the blade.
Yeah, I might be exaggerating it too from a bad habit of sharpening Western knives. But yeah, with a Western knife, you start up higher, you know, in this corner to get that tip, and then you go flat.
The Murry guy is a Japanese technician.
Yes.
It's only Japanese steel he's doing.
Yeah. Yes.
No, you're using like pretty light pressure at this point.
Yeah.
Hardly.
That's right. This is all really light. And technically, you know, there's no limit to how many times you can do this. How much time you can spend on the really fine stone, there is no limit to that.
Where's the diminishing return?
You just need to decide. When, you know,
you don't have enough time.
when you hear the really loud noise outside and your children are playing, like that's time to stop or something. Yeah, it's I don't know. I don't know if I found that spot yet, but
Notice that sometimes, like, I feel like when I move to a finer grit, the knife becomes less sharp, and I feel like that might just be a technique thing.
yeah, that's usually because people. It might be either because when you first ground in on the core stones, the edge, you didn't go all the way.
Right.
So you can have like one bevel that's shooting teeth off and it feels like a burr.
Yeah.
And the other one, you didn't quite grind it all the way. They're not connected. So it's doing that.
Right.
And you got teeth.
Yeah.
And then you knock those off with the fine stone and then you're just left with the dull knife again.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just you got to take a little further on the coarse stones.
Yeah.
And then it's also, for some reason, it's easy to change your angle to go steeper on this.
Yeah.
And you can grind in a nice acute edge, and then you take it to this thing, and you make it less acute. So just err on the side of super acute the whole time.
So, when it comes to sharpening more like square-shaped knives, are there like a Macquarie or cleaver and things like that? Are there little differences, like different methods you find work better than this, or is it pretty much all the same thing?
It's all the same. If I want to be particular and do a convex edge on the cleaver, like that, then you actually rock the knife on the stones or the cleaver. I don't do that. That's what you would do in theory. But what I do is I hold the cleaver and I do that. Because the cleaver does not have to be crazy sharp. I know that's like blasphemous to say. That something need not be that sharp. But this is actually just as efficiency. This is how I tend to deal with the cleaver. And I only really use the cleaver for what it was designed for cutting spine, which is a fibrous bone. There's no reason to ever be wailing on a femur with a cleaver. Don't do that. It's for fibrous bone. It's for vertebra.
It's for cleaving.
It's for cleaving, yeah. Not splintering. Yeah. Because of that, it doesn't need to be super, super crazy sharp. So I think I've sharpened that cleaver like 3 times in the 10 years that I've owned it. Axes, though, are different. I do like to keep those very sharp. Alright, let's see if my hand gets some sense.
So it's really just as acute as possible and then minutely less acute.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Right, this is pretty good. This still feels very aggressive, so I would like to spend more time on the fine stone.
Yeah, so it's like really acute, but then for the edge, you want to go just slightly less
And
acute.
you can actually see like along the tune of it, there's like little divots, and that's what you'll get when you do the secondary edge, right? You'll get all those out.
Yeah, and it makes it a slightly like sharper
See, like
edge.
there.
It creates that. Because if you were to,
What are your thoughts on
have an
taking
acute
carbon stainless
and then
steel
try and get
onto
the secondary edge
hybrids?
more acute,
Yeah.
you don't get a good
I
cutting
would
edge.
sharpen
It's
a
like
high carbon
acute
stainless
and then
steel
slightly less acute.
exactly like this.
Yes.
This is how I sharpen all the knives. So even like 100%
That's why
stainless
he's
knife.
like working it as acute as
This
possible,
method.
and then just a fraction.
It's
bringing
identical.
the knife up.
That's right.
Oh, that same pair of shoes. They're nice.
From the story that I've heard about this technology of these stones, it's like starts with weapons,
Yeah.
and it's meant to go drive, folded steel through someone's head.
Wow.
Just like
Yeah.
take heads off.
Yeah. Probably want a convex edge on that so you could do it a couple times. Well, because if you chop one guy's head off, he's buddies are not going to be happy about that. So
His buddies.
you're probably going to have to keep going.
Became notorious enough when people would be lining up to be first.
It's the death of mercy, though. It's a swift ending.
Yeah.
All right. So, how does that knife feel?
Very sharp. Sharper.
Yeah. And honestly, I could spend, much more time on the fine stone with it,
Can I get a feel of that?
just to polish it out.
Thanks.
It would feel less aggressive, but no less. It would still readily, hold your fingers to it.
So you're looking for it to just like stop.
Yeah.
It's like going into the ridges of the fingerprint.
Yes.
And stopping like the corduroy of your fingerprint.
Yeah, it is. It is just breaking the surface tension of your skin, and just slipping in there.
It's like fundamentally different than woodworking tools, which don't have a secondary. It's
Yeah.
all the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
But it's thinner there. So it's still like the angle is less acute.
You can see it in the light too. See it, this shiny. It's more polished. It goes from this cloudier to like more mirror.
When you're doing your stropping strokes, do you have any advice for not being too hard on the tip, or is that purely just lots and lots and lots of practice?
Yeah, it's so hard. The tips are just very difficult because of their dimension. Especially with that bull nose, like just a standard butcher knife.
You can keep developing it, right? And a Japanese knife will just get shorter.
Yeah,
but it
that's
will always be awesome.
Yeah, it
Till,
just
like,
gets shorter.
That's the same with their chisels. It's like designed to get taken down for years, forever.
Yeah, they designed sharpenability into their knife shapes, and that's a huge advantage. All right, yeah, it's still pretty burry, but so you can, once you start, you will get a burr, and you can actually knock off the burr on the stone. It takes like no pressure. It feels very cruel and bad and wrong. You can also do it on the wood.
The horror.
The injured sheep I found that my neighbors.
And this tinfoil thing you talk about, like a little thing that you get that.
Yeah.
You peel a little. It's like a little wire.
Yeah, when I am doing it diligently, so not like today, but when I spend that time thinning it way down. Yeah.
And it will come off in a line.
Almost the whole length of the blade. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So with people that are doing stainless and using this kind of quick honing on the go, when they press into the meat, they're leaving that fine line of metal into the meat invariably as they're cutting into it. Are they not?
Yeah, I don't know. If you're honing with a diamond steel
Over and over again.
over and over again, you're removing massive amounts of steel.
And some of it is left on the farthest
It's
cutting
gotta
edge,
be.
and it's going to be put in the meat, right?
Yeah, it's gotta be.
It's good for you.
Little stainless.
There's some stuff in there that's super neurotoxic, chromium, vanadium, molybdenum, like
Just a
that
little
makes
bit of chromium.
chromium is super neurotoxic. Stuff guaranteed to kill brain cells. All in your perfect pasture-raised meat,
Riding along in an automobile, you're consuming worse things.
Yep. But if you can choose to not eat metal, it's nice not to.
Well, there's no stainless around here, right?
I don't think any of his are. But the method he's doing is preserving, so we're not having that foil strip off every 10 strokes.
It doesn't matter here because it's steel. Put
Yeah.
that in the food. Although steel has a little bit of.
What I'm saying is his method, he's not stopping every 10 strokes on the blade to resharpen and put that edge on with like stainless steels and guys that are using the rod over and over again.
I think that's going in the food.
Absolutely, you can see it. You can, if you get a microscope picture of the meat, you will see particles of that foil in the meat because it peels off quickly with the stainless. When you bring it out to that super fine, like atom splitting sharpness, when you cut in, that is left behind. That's why they're redoing it every 10, 15 strokes because it's gone. Where did it go? Into the carcass. You can run magnets over it, like neodymium magnets over the cuts and pick up particles. But this is why people don't.
Yeah.
The discipline of this, all the front end discipline of this, is circumvented by quick.
I know, I feel myself, I'm falling away, guys. I don't know if we'll get to anything else today.
He's going into the stone.
Feeling it. I know, I gotta pull myself out of the zone here, or
this is the ancient stone.
We're not gonna cut anything today.
Versus the stresses of writing this. This is such a
Some of the others, the tension has fallen away as well.
Yeah. This one wasn't bad from yesterday, so I can just drop it and bring back a little. I don't need to grind in a new edge here.
So it would have been cool to have him here.
He has his. So next week he's being
So you get feedback from even the water pattern on the stone.
That's right.
As it's coming.
It's my wrist.
Yeah.
With the chisel, because it's such a larger face, that's actually part of the tool. Is you're watching the pattern to make sure that it is the shape of.
Oh,
you know, if
the
it's
chisel?
a little thinner, then you know your angle's wrong.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's kind of the sharpening method that I follow. That's the whole thing. Grinding heavily, dividing into segments, to remove steel, and then all the stropping happens on the fines. Or no, you can do stropping on the coarse stone too, but that's all just a stropping motion to polish the edge that you've established on the coarser stones. And that's the basic principle. It's just make it acute, because that's what sharpens. And so your axes, your shovels, all appreciate this.
With the burr, with chisels, you take the burr off like 20% of the other strokes. You know, so like if you take 10 strokes on the sharpen side, and you go to your fine side and do 2 to get the burr off every so often, but you don't do that. You're like taking the burr off kind of at the end, eh?
Yeah. Because that's really when I bring it up. Is when I'm doing the stropping. That's what really brings up the burr. It's the stropping motion. And then you just want to knock it off. Keep going.
So if you were to do this the full process, you do all the work to get the whole thing down without the back.
Yes.
And then put the edge on it.
Yes.
And then flip it over and just a little bit off the back. Like a few.
I remove the burr. At the very end. Because it just even by continually stropping it, you're gonna be removing some of it. You know, a lot of it actually. And it's only when it's pretty distinct and I need to move on and like I still see it on there, then I'll rake it across the stone.
Got it.
But technically, you could take that burr out by coming up on it, by only stropping. And that's really satisfying. It takes a long time.